for joining us today. This is the first episode for The Tides of Business. My name is Tamara. I am the CEO founder of Manta Systems. Our guest today is Alex Rose. I'm so incredibly excited for you guys to join her. She is an amazing person and she does literally everything in the saltwater realm. So I couldn't be more excited for her to join us. So thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah,
When you first start a podcast and you're inviting people to join the show, like everybody's kind of nervous to be the first one. I talked to a lot
it's
of people
true.
like, yeah, maybe later I'll join a different podcast. So you're very brave in joining me today. So thank you very much for that.
For sure, jumping in.
Now, if you're not familiar with Alex, she wears a lot of different hats. She does a lot of really, really cool things. So you want to start us off and tell us kind of what you currently do? What are your currently different jobs
For
in the sea?
sure. Yeah, so yes, you are correct. I do a bunch of things. I got started in the dive industry and just the water world in the first place when I started scuba diving. I got certified when I was 18, which was not early enough. If you're ever thinking about doing it, do it as soon as you can. It's never too late, and it's almost never too early. So yeah, get to it. So that really got me hooked on everything water related. But honestly, before then, my interest in everything water started with where I live. So I live in Chicago, and I don't have an ocean anywhere near me. But luckily, I do have Shed Aquarium, and Shed Aquarium was a huge place with many formative moments for me. So some of my first memories are from there, and so I definitely grew up going there a lot and just wanting to know everything I possibly could about that world. So before I actually got into the water, my worldview was definitely through an aquarium. So that's kind of where everything started. And now I work for a few different magazines. So one of them is Ocean Geographic, which is an ocean conservation magazine based out of Sydney, Australia. Comes out 4 times a year, and I'm their science editor. So I get to write and do underwater photography and editing, and that alone is really fun. And it allows me to travel a lot too, because we run expeditions, some that I would consider just like your regular dive trips, and others that are a lot more large scale. For example, we just ran, well, not just, but ran an expedition about a year and a half ago to Antarctica with 110 people. So that's a lot different than managing 12,
Yeah, that's
so
amazing.
that's, yeah, it runs the gamut. But yeah, so that's a big part of what I get to do. And then, as you know me better from, I also work for Coral and Amazonas Magazine, which are owned by Aquatic Media Press. So Coral's been around for 20 years, a little bit longer. Amazonas about 14. So I've been with those companies for the last 2.5, which is great. Allows me to be my standard aquarium nerd default, which is great. And let's see. Oh, yeah. And those are the big things. But then I also have a small ocean conservation company called Blue Ring that I started back in 2017. I started that because I spend a lot of time doing public talks and presentations about ocean conservation issues. And the thing that always comes up is how big these problems are. And it tends to kind of polarize people and make them feel like they can't make a difference or they can't do anything because it's just too big. So then they don't. And that's not a productive way for us to feel, as tempting as it is. So I wanted to create something that's a little bit more fun and accessible and inexpensive, to make a difference. So Blue Ring is simple. It's a $25 annual membership, and you can marry the ocean, and you get a blue ring, or a pendant. And then every year I donate 71% of my proceeds to a different ocean conservation nonprofit. So it's kind of my way of giving back to an industry that has given me everything. So
Oh,
yeah, that's my
yeah, that
main
is
stuff.
awesome. When I first heard about that, I was like, that is very, very cool. You do ocean conservation on top of everything else. And
Yeah,
it is
it's
a way
fun.
for people to give back, and to
Exactly.
it's hard to know like where to donate and it's hard to know where exactly that money is going to be used. So it's
Yes.
really cool for them to have like one place they can, go ahead and donate and they know it's going to go to a good place.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing, I always struggled with that myself too. And I thought, well, where should I donate? Like, if I have money, where do I want my efforts to go myself? And it's like, none of us have a lot of money to spend on this kind of stuff. We're all usually on a budget. So it matters where you put your money. And you don't necessarily want to put it, as much as I love big organizations have a lot of overhead too. So if you're donating small amounts, it's mostly going to administrative stuff.
Yes,
And
because your money
and
is
that's
going
just the
somewhere.
reality of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's just I would rather put my money with a small business, where a small amount's going to make a big difference. So yeah.
That's really great. And I don't know if you remember the first time that I ever chatted with you, I was like, I love your life. Like,
Yeah,
I want your life. Like, you're absolutely, it's incredible all the different places that you have dove over the world. And,
very lucky.
Antarctica, like, that's insane. Like, what is
Yeah.
the biggest challenges in dealing with an environment like that?
Oof. Yeah. So, Antarctica, well, actually, the poles in general, obviously getting there can be a bit of a hassle just because you have so much stuff to bring, especially if you're going to be in the water and shooting. Like, camera gear is bad enough on its own, and dive gear is bad enough on its own, but you smush those together in a cold environment. That's a lot of checked bags. So, you definitely have a
And for
ton of
110 people,
gear.
that's crazy.
Yeah, luckily not all divers. That would have been
Oh,
insane.
that,
Some people do that though, and they just run dive trips to Antarctica, which honestly would probably be a preferable way to go instead of trying to do 50 things while you're there. Just focus. But yeah, I mean, the water is extremely cold. And I mean, luckily I'm from the Great Lakes area, so I'm used to cold water, but not that cold.
yeah,
I mean,
that's a
this
different
is,
type of cold.
yeah, that's water that if it weren't salty, it'd be frozen solid. So like it's as cold as it gets. So polar snorkeling and diving always comes with the issue of thermal protection, and you really need to wear a lot of gear. And consequently, if you're diving, you also need to wear a lot of weight to get you down because all of that stuff that you're wearing is very buoyant. So if you're just floating at the surface, you're not going to sink.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
yeah, so I wind up wearing a lot of weight. Like I'm not a tall person. I'm 5'2", and I usually wind up wearing about 30 pounds of weight just to like get comfortable and stay down. So that's a lot if it happens to be a shore dive. You look a bit ridiculous. But yeah, so that is definitely a challenge. Like that said, thermal protection is usually the biggest issue, and your hands, your extremities get cold really quickly. And if you're trying to operate a camera in water like that, you've probably got 30 minutes before your fingers
Yeah.
are kind of done.
That makes sense. Like even without protection, it's still gonna get in. You're still gonna be super cold, and then you're
Oh yeah, for
gonna be
sure.
short for
It's
it, right?
yeah, it's crazy how different that level of cold feels because when you think about 30 degrees outside, if you just wear warm clothes, you'll be fine for a while. But 30-degree water, yeah, that chills you like you can't believe. So you definitely want to wear as much as you can. And they make really cool stuff now. I mean, there are heated vests and all kinds of really great undergarments. My favorite company is Fourth Element. I wear most of their stuff whenever I can, and they're great because a lot of their materials are neutrally buoyant. So instead of having something that's like a fluffy ski suit that makes you really puffy up at the surface, it doesn't add any buoyancy to your gear kit. So it helps a lot and still keeps you warm. So yeah, yeah, that can be
Yeah,
challenging,
I
but it's fun.
dive in like 76, 78-degree water
Yeah,
most of the time, and even
yeah.
that is cold for me.
I
I'll wear
know, I
like a
get
3
it.
mil suit, and I'm still cold. I'm just like, what is like? How do people go below this?
Yeah.
I'm freezing. So
I know. Well, and everybody has such different thermal tolerances too, just personally. I mean, some people, I've got a friend who can easily dive in 60-degree water in like a 3 mil suit, and it's just fine.
really,
Like, I would die. Like,
I me
I
too.
can't do it. But everybody's just different that way. And, you just have to figure it out. And that's the thing with diving. It's a lot of trial and error and just figuring out what works for you, what makes you comfortable, and what you can do your best work while wearing. So, yeah, it's good.
So obviously, you have more than like a basic certification. So what kind of
Mm.
certifications do you have to go to all these really unique places?
Yeah, so I'm a dive master. So when I'm PADI certified. So PADI is kind of like the primary certification organization for anybody who doesn't know. There are others, but PADI is the main one, especially in the U.S. So you do open water, and then you do advanced open water and rescue, and then either master diver or dive master is kind of the next step, depending on what you want to do. So I'm dive master, and most of it is just getting experience. Like there is no class you can take that's going to prepare you for actually being in the water. So it's just like, yes, do the theory, like make sure you know what you're doing, but just get under the water. That's the best way you can get yourself to a place where you're comfortable going into new environments. Because I certainly wouldn't recommend doing really difficult things right off the bat. You're kind of setting yourself up for failure if you get certified and then you're like, well, I'm going to go on a dive trip to I don't know the Coral Islands or something. Like this is not easy diving. You should not start there.
Yeah,
So
start super
you have to
basic, have
be
some
yeah, you have
good
to be
positive
realistic about it.
experience.
Yeah, for sure. So start simple, start shallow, and depth is always the thing. We talked about this earlier. People always are like, "Oh, how deep can you go?" It's like it doesn't matter how deep you go. It's about what you want to see, and some of the most beautiful things you see are in 30 feet of water, and it just
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It's about the experience. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, and for me, like, what I mostly like to see is the shallower stuff, I'm into the
Yes.
corals and all that kind of stuff, and,
Yeah.
you get too deep, you lose the light, so,
Exactly.
for me,
Yep.
that is my sweet spot, but I bet being
Hmm.
really deep and just seeing really unique creatures that we don't really see very often, is probably really
Definitely.
amazing.
It would be great. And I mean, I don't, most of what I do is photography based and some video. So, I've got video lights and strobes, which obviously helps to keep things lit up. But of course, the deeper you go, like you said, the less light there is. And the expedition that I was just on in Indonesia, Richard Pyle and Brian Green are, well, they're like the biggest awesome ichthyology people probably around right now. And being able to be on an expedition with these two was really fabulous. But they're both rebreather divers, so they go really deep. You can't stay long, of course, because you're absorbing huge amounts of nitrogen when you're at that depth. And I mean, they're at like 500 feet. So this is deep, deep diving. But the cool thing is, it's just nobody goes. It's kind of this weird in between
Yeah,
twilight zone where people don't spend a lot of time. It's like you're either within recreational dive limits, which is not much below 100 feet, or you're really deep in like a submarine where you're thousands of feet down, and that's totally different. But this whole little middle bracket just kind of gets ignored a lot of the times. And it's got some really interesting species composition and just different corals, different fish, different growth forms of the same corals. I mean, there's just so much to see. And yeah, I don't do that kind of diving. I don't know if I've got the guts to do it, but it's amazing to hear about what they do and what they see. And just, I mean, they did a project in South Africa, I believe, where they went diving with the coelacanth. I mean, a real live coelacanth in 400 feet of
yeah,
water. I mean, that's just insane.
that is
so and
that
so
is
cool. But
crazy.
it's out there, like that kind of stuff is still out there to do. And I think that's the most fun part about any sort of ocean exploration is that there's always something else to learn. There's just so much we don't know. And the deeper we go, the less we know. And that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you said, there's so few people doing that, experiencing that. It's really,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a different world, a different planet, like what you're actually
Completely.
seeing is just so unique that,
Yeah.
it's just really special. That's
Yeah.
very cool.
It is. I love it.
You were telling me like you do a lot of filming, like you do a lot
Yeah.
of video and
Hmm.
things like that. You were talking about you were diving in a national park. And you were talking
Yeah.
about like the underwater for topography of how it was so incredibly different
Yeah.
than what was it above? Could you tell me that story again?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So, let's see. Was I telling you about Indonesia or was I telling you about Yellowstone?
Yellowstone, yeah.
Okay, good, good. So
You're like,
yes,
I've been to so many places,
I,
jog my
well,
memory.
it's like it's kind of true. There's a lot. There's always a story. That's the thing. Like, there's always so much to see and so much to talk about. Like, there isn't a single place you can go and come back from without a million things to say. So, yeah. So, one of my film projects is with my business partner Jennifer Idle. She lives in Texas, and we have an ongoing film series that we're working on called Protected Waters, where we go scuba diving in protected bodies of water around the United States. It's a self-funded thing. We just kind of decide once a year to go on a road trip and make a film about it. And hopefully at some point we'll actually get it picked up. We're working on that right now. So we'll see what happens there. But our first big project was going to Yellowstone. And one of the things that we like to do is find places that are really well known to people, but not for the reasons that we're going. So most people know or have been to Yellowstone. I mean, it's our first national park. It's an amazing place that I hope everyone can go to. And you don't usually think about it as a scuba diving destination.
I didn't
Uh,
even know you
Not a
could. Like,
thing.
I had no concept that you could dive there. That's amazing.
Exactly. And that's the crazy thing. And you can dive so many places like that where it's just people don't, so you don't know, but you can. And that Yellowstone Lake is particularly interesting because it's on such a geologically active piece of the United States. So Yellowstone has experienced three volcanoes that we know of. The most recent one was 640,000 years ago. And so the topography of the lake has changed every one of those times because it just gets remapped by the volcano. So the current way that the lake is set up is the top third of it is inside the old caldera of the volcano, and the bottom two-thirds is outside of it. So that section that's inside has a really interesting underwater world going on. So because of all of this geologic activity, there's very nutrient rich and mineral rich water there. And because of that, some of it tends to precipitate out. And the idea is that what's happened over the years is that these bacterial filaments were one of the only things growing in the lake. And then all the minerals started to condense around those and form these big towers. So when you go diving in Yellowstone, in that part of the lake, there are these huge, like 20 to 30-foot tall spires made of silica that's just condensed on these bacterial filaments. They're like these huge black towers underwater, and there's nothing else around it. It's just like lake bed and then towers. So you can imagine everything congregates on it because it's like the only 3D structure in the area that's not flat. So you get copepods and freshwater sponges and amphipods and snails, and like everything that's in the lake just kind of sits on these. And such a weird world. I mean, it's this murky, cold green water. I mean, it's like 42 degrees. It's cold, cold, cold water. So you just have to like go out in the middle of the lake. You can't see anything at all. And you just drop down. And you're like, okay, well, we'll see what's here.
Does it
And
clear up when you
so
go down, or it's murky the whole
not
time?
much. It's pretty murky the whole time.
Yeah, I
And we
remember it
tried
feels
to do
so
this
eerie
twice.
being down. Like you can't see really well, and there's like these giant
Yes.
spires. Like that to me would be like, ugh.
It's super eerie. That was actually the weirdest experience because we went twice. We went in June and we then went back in September because smart me, I was thinking, oh, June, it'll be nice and cold still. It'll be really clear at that time of year. No, I kind of forgot that this is like a glacial meltwater area. So it's just silt.
Oh, that makes sense.
June was worse than expected. Yeah, you really, the visibility is maybe, I don't know, 10 to 20 feet at best. So when you go down, you don't see any of these spires at all. And when you finally start to come up to one, you just see this like ominous shadow in the distance because you can't see what it is. It's just this big dark shadow. And you're like, are we in a Lord of the Rings movie? What's happening here? Like, I'm not sure what's coming out of the gloom here. So, yeah, it is very surreal, very strange. And, but then when you come up on them, you can light them up and there's so much growing and you're like, okay, fine, we feel good now.
Yeah.
But it is odd. It's a very strange feeling.
Now, did
Yeah.
you know that was there before you went down there?
We did. So we knew that they were there. So my business partner, Jennifer, you should talk to her too. She's actually the first woman to dive all 50 states. And she's got a book about it called An American Immersion. It's really cool. And she'd been there prior and had seen the spires and was like, whoa, that's got to be our first location. And I was like, that sounds weird. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I
So
love your
that's
spirit.
how we wound
You're
up
like,
there.
let's just go. We're gonna crush
Let's
it. It's gonna be
go.
amazing.
Yeah. You make it work.
Very
So
cool.
that was fun. It was a cool experience. Yeah.
So, business side. So,
Mm.
how do you get a film like that picked up? Like, do you have contacts in the industry, or do you just kind of like send it out to a bunch of people?
Yeah, so that's a bunch of different things. I mean, I didn't come from a world of film, so this has been a learning process for me, and we're just kind of figuring things out as we go. Initially, we just wanted to make sure that we had content to share with people. So it's just a matter of getting out there, doing it, getting the footage, having something to show for your work. And we're currently in talks with a team, two people who we were connected to who live in Atlanta, which is a big production city, who are sort of trying to build up their portfolio of shows that they're pitching. So we are part of the pitch and we're trying to figure out how to do this show. So we really like being as inclusive as possible. And like as much as normally we just do the two of us because it's easy and it's cheap to just hop in a vehicle and just go drive somewhere and do it. Yeah, you can do so much more, especially if you've got some production money backing you. And what we'd really love it to be is an entire female dive team. So like it would be
Oh,
our like, let's go here and let's figure it out. And we'd be the leaders of the team, but we'd love to have women from all over the world, like to come join us on these expeditions. So I think that's kind of the lean that we're going for right now.
Okay, so I misunderstood. I was thinking that you were filming all these, putting it together, and then going, here, National Geographic, televise this. But you're wanting like a running series.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
That is
Yeah, we
so
want this to be
cool.
episodic.
There's so many
Yeah.
places that you guys could do that with. Oh, that would
So
be
many. And I
amazing.
mean, we want to start just so that, because I don't know, when with all this production stuff, they tend to like things that are very bucketable. So you can say, like, we did all of this or all of that. So yeah, it just fits nicely into their schedule. So what we're probably going to start with is all of the national marine sanctuaries. And there are 16 national marine sanctuaries in the United States, which
Okay.
for, something that's probably 8 episodes, that's 2 seasons. So that's kind of the idea. We'll see if it happens, but yeah, we're trying to make it work. So that's the goal.
Very
So
cool.
yeah,
So
it'd be
how many do
protected
you
waters.
film before you pitch it? Or
We did 2 before we even bothered starting to pitch, because we figured we needed some diversity. You don't want to
yeah.
just do one. So the first 2 that we did were Yellowstone, and then the second one that was an adventure. So the second one we filmed during COVID. So we were planning to go to California for our second one, to the marine protected areas of Southern California, to see leopard sharks. But that was 2020, and there was no way that was happening. And Jennifer, like I said, lives in Texas, and she was like, well, we could go do something in Texas. I was like, well, what did you have in mind? She was like, well, we could go to the coast, because she grew up there, and the Laguna Madre is there, which is actually the largest hypersaline lagoon in the world. And there are only 7 in the world, and that's the biggest one. So it's Padre Island National Seashore is down there, and it's this huge seagrass bed where all the sea turtles come. And it's a really cool spot, and it was a ghost town. So it was kind of perfect. I
So
drove.
perfect.
Yeah, I got in my car because no one was comfortable with flying yet. Like, nobody knew what was going on, because I mean, this is summer of 2020, so it was just crazy out there. So I got in my car at 3 o'clock in the morning and drove to Austin, Texas, straight through. So 17
From
hours, Chicago to
Chicago?
Austin. Yeah.
Okay. You're like, let's do this.
I was like, okay, if it's happening, I got to get there. So no sense
Love
dragging
it.
it
I
out. It's
love
not
your
a very
spirit. I
exciting
love
drive.
it. Yeah.
Thanks. So yeah, I got there, and then we packed up her van, got all of our dive gear, and just went and drove to Padre Island and did that for 5, 6 days, and went and filmed at the Turtle Research Center down there, and yeah, interviewed some people from a distance. It was such a process. But no one knew how long this was all going to last. I was like, we can't just not
You can't
do
just wait.
anything for an indefinite amount of time. Like, let's work around it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what we did. So yeah, we had 2, and then started kind of pitching it around. And I went to Jackson Wild Film Festival last year, about a year ago now, which was an amazing experience, and talked to some really cool people from like PBS and Nova, and like places that I think would like that kind of content. It's like family friendly, educational, for everybody content. So yeah, we'll see where it goes, but this stuff takes longer than you'd like it to. So yeah, fingers crossed.
So, what is I could talk to you forever about diving. Like, this podcast could be just
It's
like
so
10
fun.
hours long. But last question about diving. So,
Yeah.
what is one place you haven't dove yet that you were just like, has to happen, bucket list? This is it.
Oh, that's tough. But that is really tough, because there are so many. So I'll tell you 2 things. One of them is an actual place, and one of them is not. So where I really want to go that I haven't been, just because it's such a unique place and it is changing really quickly, is New Zealand. So New Zealand has kelp forests. It's got the tallest kelp forest in the world. And
Oh, I love that.
it's really fabulous. I mean, I've never been. Also, I just want to go to New Zealand really badly. But they've got some really unique things. So, I mean, obviously, having this huge kelp forest is really incredible, but their waters are warming pretty rapidly, and the kelp is degrading quickly from that, because, as we all know, kelp does not like warm water.
Yeah.
So it's in flux a lot, and it's a place that I don't want to miss seeing, because I didn't get there soon enough. And I mean, I hate thinking of things like that, but it's the
It's
reality of it.
reality.
Places change, and I don't want to miss it. So I would love to go to New Zealand and go dive the kelp forests there. They're also a spot where, so I have a thing for pufferfish. There is, yes, so it's not regular, but it's the only place I've ever seen like a schooling aggregation of pufferfish. Like 100 of them. Crazy. Like, I've seen the pictures, it's on the list. I must see
I
the
must
puffers.
find the
I
Hover.
I I must find them. So that is a major goal, to get to New Zealand and do some diving. Um, but the second place, and this is actually a quote that Dr. Sylvia Earle uses all the time when people ask her where she'd like to go diving, where's her next dive trip, and she goes, anywhere 50 years ago. And it's like, yeah, that's a solid point because
Yeah,
I can't imagine, and that's the point is like we can't imagine unless we go. And that's why it's so important to constantly being out there documenting because for those of us who are maybe just starting diving, the Caribbean might look great. Well, it's not great, like compared to
it's
what
not
it
great
was.
compared. Yeah, because you have a
Exactly.
reference point.
Exactly. And it's this whole concept of shifting baselines where if we don't know what we've lost, we don't know what we need to protect. So yeah, that's why documenting is so important.
All right. Well, I want to be very conscious of your time. So
Oh, yeah, take go ahead.
the reason I'm excited to talk to you for like a million reasons, but you wrote a book which
I
I
did.
have to read. As soon as I heard about this book, I'm like, yes, I need to read this book. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, one of the magazines that I work for is Ocean Geographic, and we run expeditions. And for a long time, we've been wanting to get together a group of really awesome ocean advocates and talk to them, not just dive with them, but talk to them. So we finally got everyone's schedules to align, which probably has taken years. And we had six ocean legends. So we had Dr. Sylvia Earle. And for anyone who doesn't know Dr. Sylvia Earle, I would encourage you to look her up. She's got an amazing TED Talk from '09, and she's got a nonprofit called Mission Blue, where they assign hope spots, so places of particular environmental significance all around the world. And it's kind of like a precursor to an MPA. It kind of highlights a spot and says, like, this is special, this needs to be protected. So Sylvia Earle is amazing. She is my mentor, my hero, my reason that I'm doing what I'm doing today. I met her when I was 9 years old, and she has been a huge driving influence in my career.
Oh,
So
that's amazing. I didn't know you had met her like
yeah. Oh, yeah. When I was a kid, she was on her book tour for Sea Change, the book that came out in the '90s, I guess. And yeah, she was talking at Shed Aquarium, and my mom took me to go see her because I was like, I have to
I have to meet her.
meet her. Yeah. And it was,
So at
totally
9, you were
starstruck.
like already so passionate about
I
like
was
the
hooked.
ocean and conservation that you were like, this is my hero.
Yeah, totally. And
That's
she's one of those people like they usually say never meet your heroes. She is the opposite of that. She is why
yeah.
you should. And she's just great person. She's now 89 years old and still has more energy than I do. So
That's amazing.
she's
That's so
a
good to hear.
force, a force. Yeah, she's great. So she was with us. Obviously our big name on that. And then we had David Duboulet and Jennifer Hayes, which are two National Geographic photographers. David is actually the most published National Geographic photographer in history, and has had the most cover stories of anybody. So he's incredible, just like the best underwater images out there, just incredible. So and the both of them are, and his partner Jennifer is a fisheries biologist, so she's like the super science side of the team, and then he's the super art side of the team, and they're great. So we had the two of them, and then my boss at the magazine, Michael Au, who's a very well-known underwater photographer and conservationist, and then Richard Pyle and Brian Green, who I mentioned earlier with the deep diving stuff. And they work at the Bishop Museum in Hawaii and have a project that they're working on to document deep sea biodiversity in the Twilight Zone. So that's kind of everybody's general background. But to shove them all together on a boat together was like, oh, we got them.
That's the magic right there.
It truly was just to get to sit down and talk to all these people in one place and they all know each other and have these intersecting stories. And you think, wow, wow, what a bunch of lives.
So
So
you were
the book is
completely
about
just
them.
starstruck when you met them. You were just like, ah.
Pretty much every time I meet somebody like them, I'm like, oh my God, this is so great.
Well, to have all of them together, that's just so
It was
amazing.
wild. It made for
Yeah.
some really amazing conversations too. I mean, it made you not ever want to go to bed. If it weren't for the early wake up calls, I don't think I would have gone to sleep at all. You
You're
just
just like,
want to
more
talk
stories.
all
Tell me
night.
more.
And they just have, yeah, they have crazy stories. And the cool thing about being part of the industry is that it's actually a pretty young industry as like a major sport. So the people who started it are still alive. I mean, the people who really like launched the dive industry, like Sylvia and all these folks, they're still around. Yeah, the pioneers are still here, and that's really rare. So to still be able to talk to people who knew what diving was like in the '60s, like that's pretty awesome. So yeah, they were fun. And the whole idea of this whole project was to record these on the go memoirs for the six of them. And so we recorded hours and hours and hours of stories. And then I took all those home, transcribed them, which I thankfully had AI programs to help me with, because if you had to physically transcribe
No.
14 hours of talking, there would be no book yet, I'll tell you
No, there'd
that.
be
So
definitely no book. There wouldn't be a book for a couple years,
it would be a
probably.
while. So I was like, we're just going to have a try to do that first. So at least to get the transcription done. And then I rewrote everything to just read more like a narrative. Because of course we all speak a lot differently than we talk. So took all of their content and turned it into a chapter for each one of them. So it's 6 chapters, one for each, and then an intro and an epilogue and photos in the middle. And that's the book. So yeah, if you want to be inspired.
Is it a biography like of their life, or is it like stories about different dive experiences, or like the industry changes? Like what is each chapter kind of about?
It's a little bit of everything. So, the framework for what we talked to them about was essentially like, how did you get into this? Like, how did you get into diving? How did you wind up in the ocean? Basically, and like, what were your first experiences with the sea? What launched you in your career? What inspired you? What are some things that have been really encouraging versus really discouraging in the last 10 years that you've seen? Like some high points, some low points, and then advice for future generations, that kind of stuff. So it was all, we asked them all the same questions, but the answers that came out were all very different. So it's neat. I like how it turned out. We were on a really tight schedule. So I spent a few weeks not sleeping a whole lot, but we got it done. And yeah, we're just in layout now, and it's going to print October 1st. So
Well, very cool. I would
yeah.
imagine you've been an editor, like you've written a lot, like you're
Hmm.
comfortable with that. But
Yeah.
with going from article to book,
Oh yeah.
especially when you're kind of documenting like these legends, I would imagine
Yes,
that's really intimidating. Like it's
it
really
is.
kind of, scary. Where do you start off with? You want to make sure you're doing
Yes.
a really good job. Like how do you
Yep.
mentally take that leap to be comfortable writing a book?
So luckily for me, I hadn't met Brian and Richard. Well, I'd met them, but I didn't know them well. But the other four, I luckily have known now for a few years, and Sylvia for a long time. So having heard their stories and their way of talking and the way that they share their stories, and knowing that prior to it was really helpful, because it's one thing to have a recording, but it's another thing to turn that into a chapter that's them and it's first person. So it's them speaking and having the responsibility of editing someone's actual words, speaking about their own life and being like, well, I'm just going to edit this and it's going to be fine. Like, you don't want to leave anything out, but you also can't have everything in. So it's a lot of responsibility to know what to leave in and what to take out, and to make sure that even when you're rewriting, you still keep their voice, because I don't want it to be a chapter that sounds like me writing. It's not my story. So you have to be really cognizant of the right amount of editing, and not to overdo it, to just be like, it needs to read comfortably, but it still needs to sound like them. So that was probably the hardest part, but also, like I said, luckily I've known them all. So I'm familiar with the way they talk, and it really helped. But yeah, it was a lot of pressure, and just because we were on such a short time frame, it was definitely stressful to try to get this done so fast, because we have this big launch coming up at it's called the Blue Ocean or Blue Water Edu Fest, and it's this big festival for 2.5 days in Singapore that's coming up in November.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, well, we need to get it done in time for that. The event is partially sponsored by CDL, City Developments Limited, which is actually the largest green building firm in Asia. And the woman who runs it, Esther, has been a major supporter of Ocean Geographic for a really long time, and we just love having her support. And she basically said if we can get the book done, she was going to help fund the printing of it. And it's like, you can't say no to that. Like that is you have to make it happen. So Michael, my boss, was like, so yeah, it has to go to print on October 1st, and he told me this mid-August. I was like,
Okay.
oh, all right.
Let's wrap
This
this
is
up.
it's gonna be rough. And of course, it's like also at the exact same time that we've got like production week for Coral and like a million things. I was like, oh my God, this is
Yeah,
too much.
you got plenty of
So
time. No worries.
yeah, plenty of time.
Plenty of
These
time.
things always tend to come in big waves, and then you kind of have these nice little chill spots in between. But there's not been a lot of chill this year, so it's okay though. We got it done.
When can we actually buy it?
Yeah, so it should be in the US by November 1st. It'll probably take a month for everything to get printed and in the United States.
Okay.
I will have hopefully copies on hand by the end of November because we're launching in the US at DEMA, which is the big dive show. It's the industry dive show that they have every year. This year it's in Vegas and it starts the 18th of November. So as of the 18th of November, there will for sure be books in the United States. But soon, I will have a pre-order link that will go basically to the Ocean Geographic website where you can pre-order the book if you want, and then it'll get shipped to you as soon as it's ready. So yeah, so I can share that with you as soon as I have it. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's pretty exciting.
Well, that is very exciting. That is,
Yeah.
I think it would be really amazing going on like a book tour, right? Like
Yes. Well, and
that's
I
super
hadn't really
exciting.
thought about it. Like it hadn't hit me that we were going to have a physical book. Like, I don't know,
Yeah,
you're just so used to seeing everything in its PDF form and you're like, yeah, the book's done. But to actually like have a book, and I thought, well,
but it's a
yeah,
book.
this would be a great opportunity to just go talk to people. And as you might have noticed, I don't mind talking to people. So
That's
like
good.
this would be cool. I think it'd be a great opportunity to tell
Yeah,
some ocean stories and just get people hopefully hooked on the sea in a new way. So yeah,
I hope
be
so.
good. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you, Alex, so much for joining us for
Of
the Tides
course.
of Business podcast. I really do appreciate your time. I will
Yeah.
put all of the links to her information in the comments below. And if you have any questions or anything, put them in the comments as well. All right.
Definitely.
Signing off. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us.
And
Bye.
thank you.